So this is a problem in section 6.2 that always tends to cause some confusion. I usually get a lot of questions about it, and I had one question about it this morning. So I thought chances are that's probably not the only person that was having a question about this problem. And so I just wanted to put this out there for you just to make sure that that you're totally clear on what you're being asked to do here. So again, this is a problem from section 6.2. And a big part of section 6.2 is understanding when to use T to construct the confidence intervals and when to use Z to construct the confidence intervals. So you should already have noted, either from looking at the textbook or from watching my video in section 6.1 or 6.2, as well as looking at the notes, that the way you make that choice is by looking at your standard deviation. All right, so I want you to understand that, when you first read through the information given in this problem, you are given a mean and a standard deviation for a sample data set. All right, sample mean is denoted with X bar. Sample standard deviation is denoted with S. Now, anytime your standard deviation is for the sample only, you will construct this using the T distribution, and that's exactly what has been done here. So notice it says a 95% confidence interval using the T distribution, that's because we only have a sample standard deviation, was calculated to go from 30.3 to 42.7. Now, what a lot of people tend to want to do in a problem like this is they want to go ahead and say, well, let me just get the margin of error for that interval. And if I did that, this is something else I went over with you in my video, then I would look at the difference between the endpoint to the limit, or the endpoints of the interval, to see how big the interval is. And I would divide that by 2 because the margin of error goes below the sample mean at the center of the interval and it goes above. The key thing to note here is that is not what this question is asking you for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to continue reading to make sure that I'm finding the correct piece of information. All right, so notice what it says here. After it gives you the T interval, it says, after researching commute times to work, it was found, and then you've got this other standard deviation value. And notice this one specifically says this is the standard deviation for the whole population. That means you now have a value not for S, but for sigma, the population standard deviation, at 9.5. Now again, when you look at your standard deviation, that's what tells you if you're going to use T or if you're going to use Z. So if I just know the standard deviation for the sample, then I'm going to construct using T. That's what they did. But now, if I know the standard deviation for the whole population, then I should be using a Z interval using the standard normal distribution, not the T. And that interval is what they want me to find the margin of error for. Right? So notice it, and you can see from the instructions too, it says construct a 95% interval. It means get a new confidence interval using the standard normal distribution. That's because you now know the value of sigma. So what I would do here is I would, if I were using StatCrunch, which is what I showed you guys in my video, I would open up StatCrunch. All right, and you know where to find these things. You go into your stat menu. And again, the T interval was done using sample standard deviation. Now that I have sigma, the population standard deviation, I'm going to go to Z. These are always going to be for one sample. And you do with data, if you have the data values individually loaded in variable 1. You do with summary if you've got the values, the summary values like mean and standard deviation, and you want to put those values in. So I'm going to go pull my sample mean, which was 36.5, my population standard deviation, sigma, which was 9.5, and my sample size, which was 8. And then I'm going to select that I want a confidence interval. I do want the level to be 95%. And I'm going to hit compute. So this is going to give me a new confidence interval. The lower limit is at 29.9. All right, so again, what I'm doing here is I'm constructing a Z interval using the value of sigma. It's going to run from 29.9 up to the upper limit is 43.1. And this interval is what we're asked to find the margin of error for. So now, using the Z interval, I can calculate the margin of error by looking at the distance between the endpoints, the width of the interval, and then dividing by 2 because, again, margin of error goes on either side of the sample mean. So I'm going to go to my calculator now. I'm going to take my 43.1, subtract my 29.9, that's the width of the interval, divide it by 2, and this interval will have a margin of error, not at 6.2, but a margin of error at 6.6. So again, it's making sure that you read carefully, that you understand what you're being given and what the question is actually asking you for before you just jump in and calculate a margin of error and input that information.